Omagyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmritanjena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So here we are. We just had a very beautiful pilgrimage in Ekachakra. And actually this, we're now approaching what is our new year, actually, the appearance day of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gaura Avirbhav. This is like the central event on our calendar, on our year. It is the event, right, of the year. And so now we see in this, it's like about a month beforehand, there's like, it's like the ground's being prepared, and there are all these other incredible personalities also appearing. And so we're very much absorbed in thinking about Mahaprabhu and his divine associates, right? So there was Vasanta Panchami, that was maybe around 2 weeks ago. That is the appearance of Vishnu Priya Devi, the consort of Mahaprabhu. There was also the appearance day of Advaita Charya. We just had, of course, the appearance day of Nityananda Prabhu. And now tomorrow is the divine appearance of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur, who we also consider an associate of Mahaprabhu, although he did not, as far as we know, directly appear in Mahaprabhu's Leela. And actually, I'm reminded, I have Prapana Jivanamrita here. There's a very beautiful verse at the beginning of Prapana Jivanamrita. It's a verse Śrīla Sridhar Maharaj wrote glorifying Saraswatī Ṭhākur. Let's see. Yeah, it's the second verse in Prapana Jivanamrita. So the first verse is a prayer of obeisance to Gu Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari, Shri Radha Krishna. Then the second, it's a pranam to Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur, but it's composed in a very particular way. It has all these different layers of meaning, so that Śrīla Sridhar Maharaj is glorifying both Saraswatī Ṭhākur as well as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he's describing Saraswatī Ṭhākur as the embodiment of the divine message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so thereby he is glorifying both, right? And the word Saraswati itself, right, has different layers of meaning, right? And because Saraswati, it's the name of Saraswatī Ṭhākur, but it can also mean a message or words, right? And so in the name of our Mat, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Ma, and the name that Śrīla Sridhar Maharaj chose, there's this wonderful, some of you may have seen, there was this one article published from a talk of Śrīla Sridhar Maharaj where he's speaking specifically about the meaning of this name. And so he's explaining, right, Chaitanya Saraswat, it has these different layers of meaning, because Chaitanya means Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Saraswat can mean the message, right? So Chaitanya Saraswat can mean the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But then Saraswat also indicates Saraswatī Ṭhākur. And so then when you say Chaitanya Saraswat, then that can also mean the lineage from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu up to Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur. Because, we are followers of Mahaprabhu, right? But that's, of course, from one perspective, that's a very narrow group. But when you come to Bengal, your perspective changes completely, because everyone's a Gaura Bhakta, right? Especially when you go to Navadvip. Even like in other parts of India, like people haven't heard of Mahaprabhu. But when you come to Bengal, it's all about Mahaprabhu. It's all about Nityananda Prabhu. Everybody's a Gaura Bhakta. So then it's like, well, what kind of Gaura Bhakta are you? What kind of devotee of Mahaprabhu are you? I always remember it was Anjali right? Many of you know Anjali, young Anjali, who lives in Santa Cruz. When she came on our pilgrimage a few years ago, she asked, we went to Vrindavan and Govardhan, and she asked me, oh, I can't remember exactly which, I think she had asked me about someone we'd met in Vrindavan. She asked if they were a devotee. And then I told her, Anjali, everyone's a devotee here. Everyone is a devotee here. The tea shop sellers, the fruit sellers, of course the Avi, there are the obvious bhaktas who are going to the temple, but everyone's a bhakta, everyone's a devotee. It's just a question of what kind of a devotee are you, right? And so you very much feel that when you come to West Bengal, and especially if you're in Navadip, Mayapur area. So it's actually, from one perspective, devotee of Mahaprabhu is a broad field. So then what kind of devotee of Mahaprabhu are you aspiring to be? What is your conception, right? What is your ideal in life that you are aspiring after? Then we, in that name of that Srila Sridhar Maharaj chose, Chaitanya Saraswat, he's narrowed it down, specifically that conception of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that has been presented by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Ṭhākur. That understanding of who Mahaprabhu is, that understanding of how we will serve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how we will understand his internal nature, what is the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? All of these things we're appreciating through the lens of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Ṭhākur and his teachings. It's interesting. I've been thinking about this. Because Saraswati Ṭhākur, actually, the name that he gave for his mission is quite broad. Gaudiya Mat, right? Gaudiya Mat. That simply means a mission related to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? But Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he's all about being more specific, right? And more exclusive and refining things more. And so Srila Sridhar Maharaj's name is more refined, more specific, right? That specifically we are following Mahaprabhu as given by our Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Ṭhākur. And so, tomorrow is that holy day. And for us, we cannot separate who is Mahaprabhu, who is Srila Saraswati Ṭhākur. You cannot separate. They are so intertwined, right? And I'm actually now here in Calcutta. Just got here from Eka Chakra and about to travel again. And I heard that the Gaudiya Mat, they're holding a 4-day festival here. Mahaprabhu, if I forget the exact name, Chaitanya Mahotsav or something like that. But during these 4 days, starting I think today or yesterday, and then tomorrow Saraswati Ṭhakur's appearance, and then it's going on 2 more days. So they've chosen, it's interesting, right? They're not holding this at Gaur Purnima time, the appearance of Mahaprabhu, but they've chosen to hold this at this time in honor of the appearance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Ṭhākur. I thought that was a very interesting choice and very nice choice, how pleased Srila Saraswati Ṭhākur would be about that. So it's like a 4-day mahotsav, special events, glorifying Mahaprabhu and his teachings and his divine Leela. So yeah, let's go back to this verse. This is just one of the most wonderful verses ever from Srila Sridhar Maharaj. In general, of all time, from anyone. Gauravag Vigraham Vande, Gaurangam, Gaura Vaibhavam, Gaura Sankirtanonmatam, Gaura Karunya Sundaram. So Gauravag Vigraha, this is saying that this is so glorifying Saraswati Ṭhākur. He is the Vigraha, means he is the deity, or he is the embodiment, he is the personification of Gauravag. Vag is another word for message or words, vakya, right? So Avande, I offer my respects to Gaurava Vigraha, to the personification of the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gaurangam. Gaurangam means he's golden limbed, right? This is the meaning of Gauranga, with golden, beautiful golden limbs. Gaura Vaibhavam. Double meaning here, our Gurudev explained. Vaibhav means an extension, right? Like we hear how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he did many revolutionary things, right? And one of them was that he instituted this practice of referring to our godbrothers by the title of Prabhu, right? Nowadays we use that kind of loosely, but previously that Prabhu, it means Lord, it means master. But previously that was used for God and for your guru, right? It's a very high title, you know. And nowadays, you know, I hear devotees using it casually for anyone and everyone, you know, or they may shout out to someone, "Hey, Prabhu," you know. But previously, that word had some weight to it, you know. But why did Saraswatī Ṭhākur do that? Because he had this very high vision that his disciples were, and he used the same term, Vaibhav, were the extension of his guru, right? That this was his very humble vision that, you know, my Guru Maharaj has given me so much seva to carry out, but I'm unable to do so. I am unfit. And so my guru has himself extended into the form of my disciples. And so my disciples are actually worshipable to me. I'm not seeing them as inferior to me, but they are extensions of my guru. I'm worshiping them. And they have come, right? So my guru has given me so much seva, and I'm very unfit. I'm unable to carry it all out. And so my guru has mercifully come to help me in the form of my disciples. So he used the same term, Vaibhava, extension. But then this word Vaibhava, it has another meaning. It can mean wealth, right? So you can understand like a spiritual wealth. So our Gurudev said it can also mean that he, Saraswatī Ṭhākur, is the wealth of Mahaprabhu, and also that Mahaprabhu is his wealth. Then this phrase is very beautiful. On the next line, Goda Sankirtanonmatam, means that he is maddened in the Sankirtan of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And this is interesting because the actual fact is that Saraswatī Ṭhākur, and this was a part of his, you know, his part of the message that he was trying to convey, is a part of his method in conveying that he did not, we hear that he did not sing or dance in kirtan. And why is that? Because this was at a time where Sahajiism was so rampant, right? That many persons would chant the holy name in a mood of where, you know, where they're imitating the, you know, ecstatic symptoms and so on. And, you know, we hear many things in the scriptures about the importance of the holy name. We hear about different symptoms that will come from one who chants the pure name. But you know, we need to understand that there are many things surrounding that, right? In order for those symptoms to come about, there has to be an uprising of actual divine love. And to get to that stage, one has to be, you know, practicing in a very pure way, right? That it's not just that we chant Harinam and do whatever we want and think whatever we want, but it's necessary to have pure practices. It's necessary to have pure understanding and pure conception. And from that, pure realization can come, and ultimately the uprising of divine love, right? So, right, so there's so much, and you still see that, right, in India today. But you know, there was so much of this like imitation, persons showing all these symptoms, crying, rolling on the ground, and attracting attention and honor to themselves in this way. And so Śrīla Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he was trying to highlight that you know, this is actually you know, we're actually interested in internal transformation, right? That the external transformation should come as a result of the internal transformation. It's not the other way around. It's not that by projecting into the environment, creating these external transformations, that you'll thereby create an internal transformation. No. And so Saraswatī Ṭhākur therefore showed this very strict demeanor. And this was from his childhood. You know, we hear that there was one occasion, there was a school photo that was being taken. And I think it was they were meant to be like singing in the photo or something. And Saraswatī Ṭhākur just refused. And the teacher asked him, just open your mouth to make it look like you're singing, you know, something like that. So he always carried himself in this very strict way. We hear also from his childhood that he would sometimes get into fights with other boys at school in defense of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's conception. Right. And there's also the famous incident, right, when he ate that mango, that ripe mango during mango season, that his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, had purchased, he'd set aside in the kitchen. Bhaktivinoda was intending to offer it to their deity later. But Saraswatī Thakur, Bimala Prasad at the time, he's a young boy, he's around 5 years old. He sees that juicy mango, he goes and has it. Then his father comes later and corrects him. Oh, my dear boy, you know, this is our process. First, we offer the fruit to Lord Krishna, then we will take his prasad. Saraswatī Thakur took that so seriously at 5 years old, he's 5 or 6 years old, that he made a vow that he would never take mango again for the rest of his life. You know? And he followed that. This is Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur. This is Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur. And yeah, we hear that sometimes his disciples would make a chutney from the green, the unripe mango, and he would accept that, but he would not take the ripe mango ever. This is Śrīla Saraswatī Ṭhākur. So anyway, it's an interesting thing, right? Because Śrīla Saraswatī Ṭhākur, it's interesting that Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj has described him like this. Gora Sankirtanonmatam, that he's maddened in the Sankirtan of Mahaprabhu, because externally he didn't show that. But Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj is describing his internal condition, that he's actually internally he's madly intoxicated and relishing the nectar of the holy name in a real way, in a substantial way. And sometimes his disciples would get some hints of that, right? But he would not display that. They would get some hints of that. We hear of this one occasion, and this was a description that was shared to Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj by some of the first disciples of Saraswatī Ṭhākur. Because Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj came a little bit later in the Leela of Saraswatī Ṭhākur, when he already had a preaching center in Calcutta. It was still like a simple place. It wasn't when they had like the big Gaudiya Math established. They had like a rented place. But he was established, he was beginning his movement in Calcutta. But there was a whole period before that when Saraswatī Ṭhākur was still living in Mayapur, and he had started his preaching at the insistence of his father, actually, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Because this is another interesting thing. Saraswatī Ṭhākur was very content just quietly and solitarily going on with his practice, nirjan bhajan, right? Solitary worship, devotional life. In Mayapur, chanting so many thousands of names every day. He was very content living like that. But it was his father who pushed him, right? Bhaktivinoda Thakur is the one who started the whole revolution of Mahaprabhu's movement. And he needed his son. His son had come for that purpose, in fact. Right? Bhaktivinoda Thakur had prayed to the Lord, please send someone. And that person came in the form of his own son, Saraswatī Thakur. And so, but Saraswatī Thakur was initially not interested. Bhaktivinoda Thakur had to push him. And then, he needed someone to take this mission on, to preserve it and to expand it. And he recognized that person in Saraswatī Thakur. He was a revolutionary, and he was someone who could take this much further than he himself had been able to do. And so there was this one small place Saraswatī Thakur had when he began that preaching mission. Brajapatan it's called. And I believe it's on the grounds of what's now Chaitanya Mat. And I haven't been able to find the exact place. It would be nice to know, but it's on those grounds in Mayapur, the Chaitanya Mat, I believe. Some small little residence where he was based. He had a few followers around him, and he was beginning his preaching, getting into discussions and debates with local scholars, and beginning to spread the pure conception of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna consciousness. And so there was an early group who came and joined him at that time, including who later became Madhav Maharaj, he was Hayagriva Brahmachari initially. And I think it was him who told this story to Srila Sridhar Maharaj, that he told of how sometimes they would experience when Srila Saraswatī Thakur was preaching, sometimes he'd be pounding the table, like, trying to emphasize certain points. And he gave this, he shared this description and this feeling. He said it was as if he was forcefully trying to feed us some nectar. Something like that. Which is a beautiful thought. And that's something that's echoing an expression of Raghunath Das Goswami, glorifying Sanatana Goswami, Vairagya Yuga Bhakti, Rasam Prayatner, Payamam Anabipsam Andam. He's the Kripambudir Yapara Dukkha Dukhi Sanatanastam Prabhum Ashrayami. Raghunath is saying similar thing. I was blind, I was unwilling to taste the nectar of devotion, but my guru is so Kripambudir Pada Dukkha Dukhi. He is so merciful. He's an ocean of mercy. His only sorrow is to see the sorrow of others. And so he forcefully caused me to drink this nectar, this bhakti rasa. This is the nature of the pure devotees of the Lord. So this description was shared to Srila Sridhar Maharaj, how they witnessed Saraswatī Thakur. And he said that sometimes Saraswatī Thakur, when he's entering these moods of like passion and speaking the message, that his face would flush white and red and pink and all these different shades. He said, like a lotus flower. And he said, for the first time I understood the meaning of lotus face, what that means. There was another occasion we hear Saraswatī Thakur, there was some visitor. This was in Calcutta. He was some type of respectable, educated gentleman with some, general conception. And he came to visit Saraswatī Thakur. They're having some discussion. And at a certain point, he was glorifying Lakshmi Devi. And Saraswatī Thakur heard that. And he was hearing that and feeling, oh, but Radharani is who must be glorified. Radharani is the source, actually. She is the source of all divine, feminine qualities, and she is our divine queen and mistress. And so Saraswatī Ṭhākur is hearing this gentleman glorify Lakshmi Devi and feeling this urge to glorify Srimati Radharani. But then simultaneously, he's also feeling, oh, but her glories are so high. We cannot just speak her glories anywhere and everywhere in any assembly. And so this internal conflict started to take place within him, where he's feeling, oh, I must glorify Radharani, but then simultaneously feeling, oh, but it is not appropriate to glorify her at this time. And this conflict became internal conflict became so great within him that he literally ended up fainting and falling off of the chair. This is Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur. So although he did not externally show these symptoms of divine ecstasy, internally, this was raging within him. There's also that beautiful line of Srila Sridhar Maharaj in his Prabhupada Padma Stavaka, that how does it go? The Kripaya Hari-kīrtan Murti Dharam, right? That verse begins like that. Kripaya Hari-kīrtan Murti Dharam. Srila Sridhar Maharaj is glorifying Saraswatī Ṭhākur as the merciful embodiment of Hari Sankirtan. So those who knew him in a deeper way, they could recognize this. Right? He's not making a big show, jumping and dancing and crying and ecstasy and all these things, but he's actually holding this deep, profound connection with the holy name and distributing that to others in the most authentic way. So Gauda Sankirtanonmatam, he's maddened, he's intoxicated in the Sankirtan of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Gauda Karunya Sundaram, he's the embodiment of the mercy and the beauty of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Very beautiful verse. Gauda Vag Vigraham Bande, Gaurangam, Gauda Vaibhavam, Gauda Sankirtanonmatam, Gauda Karunya Sundaram. I'll read the translation here. I make my obeisance unto the deity Gaur Saraswati, the personified message of the Golden Lord, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose bodily luster is of a beautiful golden hue, like that of the self-same Lord Gaur Sundar, who is the personal expansion of that Supreme Lord Gaur Hari, who is always intoxicated by preaching the message of that Golden Lord. That's actually a very nice way of translating it, because ultimately kirtan, that means preaching, right? It doesn't only mean the musical expression of kirtan, but on a deeper level, it means spreading the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That is kirtan. That is a kirtan, a higher level, we could say. Who is always intoxicated by preaching the message of that Golden Lord, and whose divine beauty blooms in the revelation of Lord Gauranga's mercy potency. Wow, such an incredible verse. And it's so brilliant, the way that Śrīla Sridhar Maharaj has constructed this, because as I said, it is glorifying Mahaprabhu, also glorifying Saraswatī Ṭhākur. And, it's also interesting to contemplate this, you know, Srila Sridhar Maharaj wrote this in one of his prayers. He made this observation how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Ṭhākur, he appeared in this world in Puri, right? Which is the place where Mahaprabhu left the world. And then Saraswati Ṭhākur left the world in not Navadvip itself, but Calcutta, which is, you know, part of that whole area of Gauda Mandal, you could say. And that is where Mahaprabhu appeared, right? So there's this play, this parallel going on. So, you know, we cannot but see Saraswati Ṭhākur as the, you know, the empowered, empowered he's, you know, coming in as a type of expansion, extended form of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this world, you know, fully carrying his potency. Mahaprabhu is present within him. And so tomorrow is the day of his divine appearance. And I had the fortune to be with our Gurudev on a few occasions, right, on this day, and one thing that he would always or almost always bring up was he would speak on the living nature of Saraswati Thakur's continued presence and preaching in this world, right? That he saw that, the whole movement that's going on today, right? The whole movement of worldwide movement of Krishna consciousness and expansion of Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement. It's all the legacy of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Ṭhākur. And so he is alive through that movement in this world, through the extension of this message. He is present in that. And that Gurudev would also say, we're all a part of that wave. We're all participating in that divine vision and divine wave of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Ṭhākur. And he established 64 temples throughout India. That's not a small feat. That was already an extraordinary thing to do. But he had this massive focus and desire on wanting to push this into the West, right? To bring this into the West. And he sent preachers to London, to Germany. They had some level of success, limited success, something. But he planted the seeds, right, for what it has become today, right? And, his vision was that the whole world is following the West, in particular America, right? And that was also one thing which he wasn't able to fulfill in his lifetime, that he wanted to bring this to America. He talked about going to America himself. He wanted to bring this to America. And he had this vision, like, we have to because the whole world is looking at America now. We have to conquer America, and then the whole world will follow. And Gurudev described Saraswati Ṭhākur as having a spirit like Napoleon, right? Napoleon had an unorthodox revolutionary strategy of conquering the strongest section of the opposing army, right? The usual approach was you attack the weaker sections of your enemy, work your way up, but Napoleon adopted the opposite approach. No, let's take a risk. Let's take a bold risk and attack the strong part of the enemy. And if we can capture that, the rest will topple. So this was Saraswati Thakur's bold approach to preaching. he was so revolutionary, so broad in his vision, right? He had that strict aspect, but he also had this very magnanimous, broad aspect that, we need to spread the message of Mahaprabhu, and we'll do what we need to in order to support that principal mission, right? Right, we hear of that, probably the most shocking that we've heard in this regard, the most shocking incident is we've heard from Śrīla Maharaj, right, that once when Saraswatī Ṭhākur was speaking about how they would preach in London, he said Saraswatī Ṭhākur discussed this idea of running a student hostel, right, where they're running a business, they're hosting students, providing accommodation. And then in the course of that, they're also finding opportunity to share the message, right, at the same time. But then if they're staying in a hostel, they also need food, right? And you have to feed them what they're accustomed to. And so Saraswatī Ṭhākur said, he commented, if necessary, we can serve them meat, right? And Śrīla Maharaj was present. Śrīla Maharaj is coming from a strict Brahminical background. He was completely shocked. And he questioned Saraswatī Ṭhākur, but won't people criticize us because of this? And Saraswatī Ṭhākur responded, and this is his style, right? Saraswatī Ṭhākur responded, I considered this point 10,000 lifetimes ago. And he said, we must be Vaikunta Vritti, right? Means, we have to be broad. One meaning of Vaikunta is no limit, unlimited. So we must have this broad approach in our preaching, right? We cannot get so hung up on Brahminical standards and all these things, but we're trying to bring people's hearts to the lotus feet of Guru and Gauranga. That's the central mission. That's what's truly important, right? And so he was very generous. We hear of this occasion where there were some Westerners who were, there were a few Westerners who came. We hear to India and to meet with Saraswatī Ṭhākur. We hear of one German disciple, and there were a few others, but they had some habit of bathing naked, right? In India, that's actually taboo, right? Of course, nowadays things are changing. But, traditionally you bathe with your clothes on, right? Because water's sacred, right? The sunbathing, forget nude sunbathing on the beach, right? The sun is sacred. You can't show your naked body to the sun. Can't show your naked body to water even, right? So there were these Westerners, perhaps they were Englishmen. They were bathing in a public lake, right? Naked. And so there were some complaints that came to Saraswatī Ṭhākur because of that. And what did he say? He just said, he told some of his disciples, put up a screen, right? Put up a screen so that the locals aren't disturbed. He could have easily talked to those men and said, oh, you're in India now, try and respect the local customs, but he didn't say that. Just put up a screen, create harmony, right? We hear of this one gentleman who used to come and smoke a pipe in Saraswatī Ṭhākur's lectures, right? He'd sit in the back of the audience smoking a hookah or some type of pipe. And Saraswatī Ṭhākur tolerated it, I don't know, I'm not sure if it was in a temple or perhaps it was some public outside lecture venue, but it went on for some time, right? And Saraswatī Ṭhākur just tolerated it, Eventually that man was converted, surrendered to Saraswatī Ṭhākur. This was the scope of his preaching mission. He was powerful. There were other times where he could be very strong, right? In that he had all these different aspects. There's that verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita, great personalities are sometimes hard like a thunderbolt, sometimes soft like a rose. They have both sides, right? So, Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he had a soft aspect, right? In that verse that we mentioned from the Prabhupada Padmastavaka song by Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj, there's another very sweet line, Janakadika Vatsala Snigdapadam, more affectionate than a father, right? He had that aspect too, sweet, gentle, loving, generous, magnanimous. But he could also be very, very strong and very strict and intolerant of anything opposing. The way I see it, he was intolerant of any pollution of the conception. But when it came to different ways of practicing and applying, he was more generous. He was more broad. The conception remains pure and exclusive, but the means of spreading that and different ways of practicing that, he was more broad. But I was remembering this one incident we hear, and this was a lecture he gave in what is now Bangladesh, right? But at that time was East Bengal, was still part of India. And this was at Dhaka University. And he's speaking at a university. And, there how many students and professors are all there. And he starts quoting like from Bhaktivinoda Thakur's song in Sharanagati, saying that mundane knowledge is persons who are engaged in developing mundane knowledge are like asses, right? They're just like carrying this useless load of mundane knowledge. It's not going to get them anywhere, so they're all like asses, they're all like donkeys, it's all useless. Like he could talk like that, right? He could say that and get away with it, and that tells you something about his potency. Not everybody can do that, right? Like we hear that also about Swami Maharaj Prabhupada. Our Gurudev Srila Govinda Maharaj also commented, like when you read some of the writings or hear some lectures of Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, it's like kind of shocking some of the things he would say and he could get away with. Like he called the members of UNESCO, what was it, like dogs and like a bunch of barking dogs or something like that. Like he could get away with it because he's first of all, he's speaking with affection, right? He's not coming from a place of envy or criticism. He's actually speaking with affection to try and help them. Right. And he's actually living on that platform of belief and faith. He's not just imitating. So he can get away with that. If someone else says that, they'll get beat up, So Saraswatī Ṭhākur also, he had that type of potency. He could speak like that. There was this one event, and this shows you, like, gives you some idea of the type of presence that he had, right? That it was some type of convention amongst some type of religious persons. There was actually a booklet that came from these lectures of Saraswatī Ṭhākur, so all the context, the background will be given there. And it was some type of convention, religious convention, and different persons were invited to speak. It was a 3-day event. And I believe everyone had a slot every day. Like everyone had their own theme that they were discussing, and they'd elaborate on that in their slot every day. And so Saraswatī Ṭhākur, his topic was Brahmins and Vaishnavas. And so and this is something that that was fairly significant in the preaching field of Saraswatī Ṭhākur, because he's preaching in India, you know, where there's a strong presence of the whole Varnashrama system and Brahmanism, right? All the Brahminical culture and the importance that's given to that. And then the Vaishnava culture, where does that fit in? Are Vaishnavas lower than Brahmins? Are they higher than Brahmins? You know, this is a debate, right, that's going on. And Saraswatī Ṭhākur is dealing with that in his preaching mission. And this is one reason why he made the decision to give Brahmin initiation to Vaishnavas. It's not necessary, actually, but he did that to show that, you know, Vaishnavas are not less than Brahmins. They're also fit for Brahmin initiation, and they're more than that also. You know, the idea is that by chanting the holy name, then one is purified and comes to the level of a Brahmin, and then they can engage in all of the practices that are generally reserved for Brahmins. Of course, this is ultimately an external idea, because ultimately we're all simply servants of the Lord, and none of these distinctions matter, right? But we're also living in the material world, and these kinds of structures and formalities can be helpful, right? And so Saraswatī Ṭhākur kind of did a bit of a dance between all these different ideas. But anyhow, at this convention, we hear he spent the first 2 days, I believe, glorifying Brahmins. He did this in a very clever way, glorifying Brahmins, you know, quoting all these verses from the scriptures, Namo Brahmanya Devaya, right? There's this one famous verse glorifying Krishna as the Lord of the Brahmins. So extensively praising Brahmins. All the Brahmins are very happy. Then on the third day, he starts glorifying Vaishnavas, right? And speaking extensively on the glories of Vaishnavas. And what I've heard, and these lectures are, there's actually a booklet that's been made. I've come across it. I haven't read it, but I've come across it. But it is something that you can find. But what I've heard is that the overall approach that he made was that he was glorifying Brahmins as the topmost members of this world, right? Within this worldly plane, Brahmins are at the top. But then Vaishnavas are just on a totally different level beyond this plane, right? Like in that sense, you can't even compare, you know, they're just on a different level. So it was a very clever way to approach the matter and keep everyone happy, right? And to demonstrate that Vaishnavas are higher than Brahmins, but in a way that's respectful and honoring the Brahmins. So what happens, right, at the end of these 3 days, we hear that this whole crowd is so impressed by Saraswatī Ṭhākur's presentation, by his own holy aura, that the whole crowd went mad. And they're literally at one point crushing upon him, trying to take his foot dust, right? Because it's one of the things mentioned is the glories in the scriptures, the glories of the foot dust, the foot water, the prasad of the Vaishnava. So everyone in the crowd, they're so convinced by Saraswatī Ṭhākur's explanations and his presence that they naturally want to get the foot dust of who's obviously a great Vaishnava in front of them. And so they're all coming, like hundreds of people coming to take his foot dust, to the point where it became dangerous for Saraswatī Ṭhākur's life. And so there was one clever man present who grabbed this bucket of water, dipped Saraswatī Ṭhākur's feet in it, and then started like throwing that out on the crowd and distributing that. And that way he pacified everyone. Right? So this is the type of presence that Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur had, you know. And for this reason, you know, Śrīla Sridhar Maharaj gave him this title of Bhagavan, right? And so sometimes you'll hear that Saraswatī Ṭhākur is referred to as that way. Bhagavan Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur. And there are some who have objected to that. There are some who criticized our Gurudev, Śrīla Govinda Maharaj, for using that. But he pointed out, actually, this wasn't my idea. This is coming from Guru Maharaj. And not only that, there is a convention in the scriptures. There's a precedent. Great personalities who have this type of power coming from the Lord, who are displaying the Lord's potency in this world. There is a convention. They are referred to in that way with that title. And so Saraswatī Ṭhākur, he had that type of powerful presence in this world and, touched people in this very profound way. And attracted, very qualified people. This is something that's also quite outstanding about Saraswatī Ṭhākur, that, he himself was so exalted, but he also had so many disciples who were also very qualified. Amongst them, preeminently are Param Guru, Śrīla Bhakti Rakshak, Sridhardev Goswami Maharaj. So he had this group of very qualified, seriously committed disciples who were all empowered to spread his message, the length and breadth of India, and began taking that outside also. We hear there was one, he made a comment, that Saraswatī Ṭhākur himself commented on this at one point, saying, I started alone, and now I have 500 men who all say what I say. But even that, that wasn't even what his vision was, right? It went much deeper than that, and there was that one statement we hear that this one gentleman commented to Saraswatī Ṭhākur, oh, your mission is so glorious, you should have a center in every town and every city. And Saraswatī Ṭhākur looked at him and he said, no, what are you saying? He says, that's not my idea at all. He said, but we want to make a temple of Mahaprabhu in every heart, in every heart. There was this one wealthy disciple, Jagabandhu Bhakti Ranjan, and he gave all the money for the completion of the Bagbazar Gaudiya Math. This was when they transitioned from that small rented place in Calcutta into like their, this, grand temple, which became like a flagship temple of the Gaudiya Math. But this one wealthy Vaishnava, he sponsored that. But initially, Saraswatī Ṭhākur was sending out his disciples into the city, having them collect money for this project. So what happened, right, is the disciples are going out and collecting, no doubt a very large sum of, trying to collect this large sum of money. But then this one wealthy disciple, Jagabandhu Bhakti Ranjan, he hears about this and says, oh, let me do this as my seva. And so he gave all that money. And we hear some of the disciples then came to Saraswatī Ṭhākur very happy, very excited. Oh, this Jagabandhu, he has given all the funds for this project. They're thinking their Guru Maharaj will be very happy. But Saraswatī Ṭhākur was not happy. And he said, I would have preferred that you got 1 rupee, from 100,000 people. I would prefer that. Then everyone is getting some benefit. Everyone is participating in some way, right? He said that would have made me much happier, right? That this is the heart of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur. This is the spirit in his preaching mission, and we're so privileged that we are able to have some small part in that. That we are all participating in this glorious wave of Hari-kīrtan, which he inaugurated. Right? He is everything for us. Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur, Gurudev Śrīla Govinda Maharaj mentioned, when it comes to how we will practice and apply Krishna consciousness, we don't look past Saraswatī Ṭhākur. Because, as I mentioned, right, the conception is one, but how we practice it, how we preach it, how we apply it, that varies. Look at how Rupa and Sanatan lived under trees in Vrindavan, living on buttermilk and dried up week-old chapatis. Look at how Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur practiced, and preached and applied Krishna consciousness. These are all very different ways, right? So Gurudev mentioned, we are following Saraswatī Ṭhākur. We don't look past Saraswatī Ṭhākur when it comes to how we practically follow. We are looking at Saraswatī Ṭhākur. So he is so important to us. He is everything for us. And he gave every drop of his being, to give us the pure conception, not any conception, but the pure conception. Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj mentioned he shed many gallons of blood to demonstrate what Krishna consciousness is not. Right? He put so much energy into giving us something pure. And so it's also our duty to try to maintain that, to continue that, And it is sad, when we see nowadays, and Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj discussed this too, like seeing in the missions of some of his godbrothers, that, now things are going in different ways after the departure of our Guru Maharaj. And he said, he says, they are free, but I am not free. I'm still sticking very close to what I heard from my Guru Maharaj, right? There's one line of Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada I like very much too, where he says, what I heard from my Guru 30 years ago, I'm still following that. That's still going on. There's been no change. So we're trying to stick closely to the message of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur and to maintain the purity of what Krishna consciousness is as far as possible. It was something Gurudev, we heard him mention a few times, that he said, if we are not careful to follow Saraswatī Ṭhākur's conception and mood, Gurudev said, within 50 years or 100 years, everything will become polluted. Everything will become sahajiya. Right? All become imitationism, no substance. Right? We can chant and dance and have a party in Krishna consciousness, but is that making real progress, right? Is that really going deep into the practice and conception? And so, we are trying to keep close with that. And it is very nice to see too, like how there's still so much importance given to Srila Saraswatī Ṭhākur in his missions, today, extended missions around the world today. He is so important to us. And he is present with us also in the form of his divine preaching mission. Okay, well, we will stop here for today. I'm so happy to be able to discuss this with all of you today. And tomorrow I'm going to visit our temple here and join the festival there. And so we'll have more remembrance of divine glories of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur. Thank you all for your good company. Would anyone like to add any final thoughts before we close for today? Jai Bhagavan Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswatī Ṭhākur ki jai. Adivas Tadiya Shubha Avirbhav Adivas Titi ki jai. All the assembled devotees, sincere seekers ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Jai Gaur Premanande. Haribol.
Jai Shri Vishaka Didi ki jai.
Jai Gurudev. Hope you all have an inspired day tomorrow and look forward to seeing you all next time. Okay. Haribol.
I want to say